Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. I'm super excited that you guys are here this evening. I have a short presentation for you guys. So if you want to know more about how to build generational wealth, how to leave a lasting legacy for your family, how to set up a trust, and how to create wealth the right way, then you have come to the right place because those are some of the things that we're going to be going over this evening. So, as I mentioned, I have a short presentation. After my presentation, then I will open up the floor for Q&A so that you guys can answer any questions that you might have based off of the information that I'm going to go over this evening. So, my name is Christina Yvette. I am your host, and I am the founder of 7 Ways to Wealth, which is a financial literacy company that teaches people how to become a trustee and how to protect their assets. So mainly our topics for today is going to be asset protection. I want to teach you how to protect everything that you have, right? All of your assets from your business to your stocks to your primary residence, all of those things. So, like I mentioned, I am the founder of 7 Ways to Wealth, and I have been a trustee for over a decade now. This is going to be my 11th year as a trustee operating a trust. So, in this space, the way that I actually became a trustee was through real estate. And the way that I got into real estate was through nursing. So, originally, my career is as a registered nurse. And when I was in that career, I was living paycheck to paycheck. It was very challenging for me. I could not make ends meet at all. I was literally working 12-hour shifts, 5 to 6 days a week, and I wasn't spending any time with my family. And at that time, I had a 1-year-old baby that was being raised by my mom because obviously I couldn't take care of him being in the hospital 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts. So that frustrated me once I realized that I was spending more time in the hospital with my patients and coworkers than I was at home with my baby. So, because of that frustration, I had a burning desire to not depend on my paycheck. And I will be talking to you guys tonight about that because it is pretty much being stuck in the rat race where you have to show up, do your 40 hours, and then your money goes to bills, right? And so, since that was my reality, I said, okay, I need to find a way out, but I also need to supplement my income and find a second stream of income. So, I knew that I had to either start a business or go into investing. And one day I was driving to work, and there's this guy, his name is Dan Merrill, and he had an ad on the radio. And he says, do you want to learn how to flip houses? So immediately I'm driving and I'm like, yeah, I want to learn how to flip houses. Like, I like real estate. So he says, sign up for my 3-day seminar. So I signed up for his seminar. And I went for those 3 days and I learned so much about real estate. Like, I learned things that I've never heard before. And I started to go down a rabbit hole where I was obsessed with real estate, right? So I was learning everything that I needed to know on biggerpockets.com. I was on HGTV, I was on Zillow, I was everywhere, right? Attending boot camps, just I was like a sponge, just trying to grasp as much information as possible. So, 6 months after me attending that seminar, because I had that momentum, I ended up buying my first property. And so I ended up setting up an LLC and I put that property into the LLC. And I ended up getting a mentor, and this mentor put up 100% of the money. So just imagine being 25 years old and buying your first property zero down, right? I didn't have to come up with one penny, right? So I bought this property for 89,000, and my mentor tells me, Christina, you need to put that property into a trust. And I did not know what a trust was, right? I was young, I was 25, I was new into real estate. So I'm like, what is a trust? And he begins to explain to me about the importance of a trust and asset protection and how I'm putting myself at risk because this property is actually going to be renovated, but yet, anything could happen during this renovation, right? Anything can happen during construction. Imagine if one of the contractors gets injured, then what? They're going to come after me and they're going to come after my property. So I cannot allow that to happen. So what I did was I took heed to the information and I set up a trust, right? He showed me how to set up a trust. I set up a trust, I became a trustee, and I transferred that property from the LLC into the trust. And I have been operating within trust ever since. And that $89,000 house, I end up flipping it, selling it for $235,000. So on my first deal ever in life, I made six figures. And it was at that moment that I knew that I wasn't going to be in my career for long. And I knew that my money could make money for me. And it really even wasn't my money, right? Because remember, my mentor put 100% of the money up, right? So it really wasn't my money. I was leveraging OPM. I was leveraging someone else's money, right? OPM is other people's money, right? And so I was pretty much in the right place at the right time, and I was interacting with the right people, right? And so I am going to also be discussing that because people are important when it comes to your organization. So let's get started with this webinar. What I want to do is I want to first explain to you what a trust is because a lot of people do not know what a trust is. They hear the term trust and they don't know. They hear the term trust fund baby, trust fund, and they're like, what is it? And a lot of people are afraid of trust. So that's why I'm here to explain to you what a trust is so that you can become familiar, you can be empowered to know, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can go down this path. Yes, I can build a legacy. Yes, I can create a trust. Right? So we're going to dive right into the presentation that I created for you guys, okay? So let's start with what a trust entity is. Now, once again, a trust is an entity. Now, how do we actually create this entity? Well, it's created through a contract. So you have to set up a contract. You have to put all the rules and regulations in the contract, which we call bylaws, right? So there's two parts to the contract that I want you to know of. The first part is the declaration where you're declaring what it is and what it is not. So you're declaring, hey, in this trust, in this contract, I'm setting up a trust. I'm not setting up an LLC. I'm not setting up a partnership. I'm not setting up a corporation. So that's absolutely phenomenal. Now, in the next part of the contract is your terms and conditions, right? That's going to be set in your bylaws. And that is where you're going to be expressing how you want the trust to operate for the next 100 years. Okay. Now, because the trust is a contract, it's actually seen as a living, breathing entity just like you. So you are a living, breathing entity. The trust is also a living, breathing entity. So whatever you can do as a natural person, the trust can also do as a living entity. So if you can buy a house, the trust can buy a house. If you can buy a car, the trust can buy a car. If you can open up a bank account, the trust can open up a bank account. If you can build credit, the trust can build credit. So there's no limitations to what a trust can and cannot do, which is extremely powerful. Now, this trust is going to have a start date and an end date. We call it an establishment date and an expiration date. So sometimes when you're doing paperwork for your trust, you're going to pretty much provide them with the date of birth of the trust, right? Which is the day that the trust was established and then you funded it, okay? So just keep those things in mind. Now, remember we said that the trust is a contract, right? So there's several different parties to this contract. There's three parties that I want you to know of. The first party is the grantor. The grantor is the creator of the trust. Now, when you are doing your research and your due diligence, right, you're going to see different terms that mean grantor. Some of those terms are settlor and trustor, okay? It all means the same thing, which is the person who created the trust for the benefit of someone else. That someone else is the beneficiary. The grantor also is the person that places the first asset or a thing that has intrinsic value into the trust, okay? Now let's move on to the second party. The second party is the trustee. That is the controller of the trust or the individual that is going to be operating the assets. So they're going to operate the trust as well as manage the assets that are inside of the trust, okay? Which is extremely powerful. So the trustee is what we call, and so they are controlling the trust and managing the trust for someone else. That someone else, once again, is the beneficiary, okay? So now let's discuss the beneficiary. So the beneficiaries are the inheritors of the trust. So these are the individuals that are going to receive the assets that are inside of the trust once the trust is terminated. But before the trust is even terminated, they're going to receive distributions and gifts from the trust organization, which is extremely powerful, okay? So now that we understand the different parties involved, let's go ahead and understand the different types of trust. There are hundreds of different types of trust. So you have to do your research to see which one is the best type of trust for you. Now, I'm going to give you certain categories that every single trust is going to fall under. The first category that I want to tell you is express versus implied. An express trust is a written trust where that trust is in writing. It's in a contract style. It's in black and white, right? You can physically, tangibly touch it and you will physically sign that tangible trust, right? Versus an implied trust. So an implied trust is where you have that verbal contract, right? So there's a verbal agreement that happened between the two parties, right? And so it was oral, and it just instead of it becoming expressed on paper, it just stayed verbal, right? And so now we call it an implied trust, okay? The next category that I want to share with you guys is simple versus complex. A simple trust, it is shorter in nature, and the trustee is required to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust. Versus a complex trust is longer in nature, which means that it has more bylaws or terms and conditions, which means that because it's complex, the trustee is not required to distribute all the money that's inside of the trust. So funds can be held in a complex trust, okay? Now let's talk about the next category. So the next category is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So a discretionary trust is where the trustee has full discretion to be able to make decisions for the trust that they feel is in the best interest of the trust, but it's not inside of the contract. Versus non-discretionary, which means that they cannot make those decisions for the trust if it's not mentioned inside of the contract, okay? Now, the next category that I want to share with you guys is statutory versus non-statutory. So a statutory trust, when we are referring to statutory, every single state has its own statutes and codes, which are laws. So with a statutory trust, what we're saying is that the state statutes and codes are embedded inside of the contract, okay? So because those state statutes are embedded inside of the contract, that trust is limited to where it can only be used in that one state. It cannot be used anywhere else, okay? And that trust is forced to be registered with the state, which means that it becomes a part of the public records, which means that anyone can search for the trust, they can find the trust, and they can see what's inside of the trust, okay? Which is very detrimental, right? Compared to a non-statutory trust. So a non-statutory trust is where there are no state statutes and codes embedded inside of the contract, which means that there's no restrictions and there's no requirements in order for that trust to be registered with the state, which means that you can use this trust in all 50 states, plus all of the US territories, and you get to maintain the privacy of that trust because people are not going to be able to search for it and find it because it's not registered with that one state. So the last category that I want to give you guys is revocable versus irrevocable. Now, when we are referring to revocable and irrevocable, we're only referring to one party. That one party that we're referring to is the grantor. So what we're saying is that the grantor either has revocability or irrevocability. So now let's talk about a revocable trust. So with a revocable trust, the grantor has the ability to be able to revoke or terminate the trust. They can revoke assets that they placed inside of the trust. They can make any type of amendments that they would like. They can remove trustees and beneficiaries if they would like. So typically with a revocable trust, the grantor is also going to serve as the trustee and the beneficiary. So this type of trust is actually seen as their alter ego. It's not seen as a separate entity from them. So it's seen as them, and that type of trust is actually going to operate off of the social security number of the grantor. Okay. So unfortunately, with a revocable trust, your assets are not protected at all, because if creditors decide to come after the grantor or the trustee, then they can actually go after the trust. And if they go after the trust, then they are actually able to make claims. So let's just say that this trust was to end up in court, then the judge will pierce through a revocable trust, right? And then that trust will then end up a part of the public records versus an irrevocable trust. So an irrevocable trust is where the grantor has irrevocability, which means that they cannot make any changes to the trust, they cannot terminate the trust, they cannot revoke any assets that they've placed inside of the trust. They cannot terminate the trustees or the beneficiaries. So because of the nature of this type of trust, the grantor has no power and no control. The trustee has all the power and all the control, which means that the grantor cannot serve as the trustee and the grantor cannot serve as the beneficiary, which is powerful because if creditors come after this type of trust, they will not be able to make claims against this type of trust. If this type of trust was to end up in court, the judge will not pierce through an irrevocable trust, which is extremely powerful. So now when you're thinking about trust, right? And the type of trust that you want to set up, you want to be able to do your due diligence. You want to be able to make sure that you're choosing the right trust for you and your family. So this is the trust that I recommend, right? So if you are intentional about protecting your assets, then you want a bulletproof trust. A bulletproof trust is going to fall under these 5 categories. So 1, it's going to be express. 2, it's going to be complex in nature. 3, it's going to be discretionary. 4 is going to be non-statutory, and then the last one is it's going to be irrevocable. So it should fall under these 5 categories for it to truly, truly, truly protect your assets and be bulletproof from creditors coming after the estate. Okay. So let's move on to number 2. Now, when you are creating a trust, 1, you're going to determine the type of trust. 2, you're going to name the trust. So just like how you named your business, or just like how you name a baby, right? You are going to name the trust as well. Now, there's 2 things that I want you to think about. The first one is, do not make the same mistake that a lot of people make, which is naming the trust after themselves, okay? That is not what we're going to do, because we want to operate within privacy. So we don't want anyone to know that we're associated with the trust, so do not name the trust after yourself. And the second thing is that you don't have to have the word trust in the actual name. Now you're going to appoint the different parties. So go ahead and appoint your grantor, right? So if you are wanting to create a revocable trust, then you can be the grantor. If it's irrevocable, you cannot be the grantor, okay? You want to serve as the trustee. So the trustee is the one who controls the trust. So you want to maintain control over those funds as well as the assets. So you're going to appoint yourself as the trustee, and you're going to appoint someone else as the grantor. And your beneficiaries are going to be your children or your next of kin, okay? Now, the lastly is your successor trustee. So that is the individual that's going to take over after you in the event that something happens to you. Meaning, if you become incapacitated, if you decide that you want to resign, or if you transition and expire, then at that point in time, your successor trustee is going to pick up where you left off, okay? So you need to have a succession plan in place in order for your legacy to continue on for many generations into the future. Now let's move on on to step 3. So in step 3, we're going to actually create the trust agreement. Remember, we're creating a contract. In this contract, we're going to put the bylaws of how we want the trust to run, right? And so one of the most important provisions are spendthrift provisions. So those are where you have your spendthrifts. Your spendthrifts are beneficiaries that want to spend all the money that's inside of the trust. Well, guess what? We're not going to allow them to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put ourselves in a position to where we're going to control the money from the grave. So if we control the money from the grave, then at that point, we are going to have spendthrift provisions like an age restriction to say, hey, you cannot receive money from the trust until you're 20 years old, right? We can have an education restriction telling them, hey, you have to have a minimum level of financial literacy education in order for you to receive gifts or distributions from the trust, right? You can have a distribution restriction to say, hey, you cannot spend this money on gambling or illicit drugs, right? So those are so vitally important. It's important for you to have the right provisions in order for the money inside of your trust to be conserved, okay? Now, let's move on to number 4. So in number 4, what we're saying is that we are going to legalize the trust. So the trust is going to get notarized, and there's 2 signatures that are required. The first one is the grantor, the second one is the trustee. Now, a notary public is going to sign as a witness. They're going to place their seal on the trust contract, and that is what's going to legalize the trust. So once the trust is legalized, now you're able to operate it. So now we're going to move on to number 5, where the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up that trust fund account, okay? So with that trust fund account, right, that means that we're going to open up a bank account for the trust, which is called a trust fund, which we're going to house funds that belong to the trust, okay? Now, when you're opening up this bank account, right, you need to determine whatever financial institution that you're going to establish a banking relationship with. It can be a bank, a credit union, or even a brokerage. The types of accounts can be a checking account, a savings account, a money market account, or even a cash management account. And so you're going to fund it with the minimum, whatever the minimum is for that particular financial institution. So usually it ranges anywhere between $100 upwards of like maybe $3,000 to $5,000 depending on the bank, okay? So now what we're going to bring with us to the bank is the following. So we're going to bring 2 pieces of documentation. The first one is our certificate of trust, which is proof of identity that our trust exists. So just like how you walk around with a driver's license, the trust also needs to walk around with ID, okay? And so this is just a snapshot of the most pertinent information regarding the trust, because what you're not going to do is bring 50 to 100 pages of your trust agreement with you, okay? So the second piece of information is your EIN number that's issued by the IRS. So this is a 9-digit employer identification number that is used specifically for banking purposes. It is highly challenging and almost virtually impossible for you to open up a trust fund account without an EIN, okay? So now that we have opened up our account, and let's say we funded it with the minimum, which is $100, now we're going to move on to the last step. So the last step is for us to be able to transfer our assets into the trust. Now, this is the step that I see people skip. This is the step that I see people make the most mistakes. This is the most important step of them all, right? Because you have certain assets and you have to convey them the right way. So, for example, let's just say that you have your primary residence, right? This is your house, this is where you live, right? And this house, right? The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to list it inside of the trust under the Schedule B so that you can list the assets. So now that you have listed the real estate as an asset inside of the trust, then what you're going to do is you have to legally transfer that asset. Remember, when you bought that house, they gave you a deed to that property. So that deed is still in your personal name. So what you need to do is you need to redeed that property into the name of the trust. And then it needs to be recorded with the county recorder's office, and then it's going to reflect on the public records that the trust is the owner of that property. So that is how you're going to do the legal reconveyance of that property, which means that now that house is owned by the trust trust and it is protected. If you haven't gone through those steps, your property is not protected and is still subject to creditors coming after it and claims against it, okay? All right. So let's now talk about the most important thing, which is the reason why you actually want to create the trust, right? So you want to create the trust for privacy purposes as well as for asset protection, okay? So just think about the two P's, privacy and protection, privacy and protection. So a trust can protect you from the following, from bankruptcies, divorce, foreclosure, heavy taxations, lawsuit, and probate, right? So let's just talk about divorce really quickly, right? So when it comes to divorce, we all know that it is between two spouses, and what's included in the divorce is your assets and your liabilities. Now, the way that a trust actually protects you is because a trust is seen as a separate entity from you. So anything that's inside of the trust cannot be pulled into the divorce. So if you set up a trust and let's just say you put a property, $500,000 and a car in there, then anything that's inside of that trust cannot be pulled into your divorce because the divorce only includes things that are in your personal name and tied to your Social Security, like your pension and your 401k. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So heavy taxations, right, is one of them, which unfortunately, a lot of us are giving away half of our money to the government, right? Especially in states like New York and California. So the way that a trust can protect you is because for your annual gross income, right? The IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to your trust, which means that instead of you being taxed on 100% of your money, you're only going to be taxed on 40% of your money because the IRS allowed you to donate 60% of it. So that is extremely powerful because now you can save a lot of money in taxes that you can allocate somewhere else, specifically to assets, right? So let's talk about the next one, which is lawsuits. Now, lawsuits, right? Do not wait until you're getting sued in order to protect yourself from a lawsuit. Unfortunately, we live in the United States of America, which is a very sue-friendly country. Everybody wants to sue you, right? So your neighbor wants to sue you, your sibling wants to sue you, your clients, all of them, your customers, all of them, your employees, all of them, your employers, all of them, everybody wants to sue you. And a lot of us, we are walking around thinking that we're not going to get sued until we get sued, right? And so I don't want that to happen to you because then you're going to be caught off guard. So you need to protect yourself from a lawsuit before it even happens, okay? So let's just say that you are a business owner, right? And you have a candle business and you're selling candles, and one day one of your clients is saying to you, well, my house burned down because of your candle, and they sue you, right? And so they sue you for $500,000, right? And so they don't sue you directly. Who do they sue? They sue your company. And your company is an LLC. So let me ask you this question, right? What does LLC stand for, right? You have this candle company, right? What does LLC stand for? I can't hear you guys.
Limited liability.
Oh, yes. Okay. That is correct. LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. So that's fantastic. Thank you for answering that. So if we know that LLC stands for Limited Liability Company, right? And somebody sues us, right? Well, we can hear it in the actual word, right? In the actual name, the company has limited liability. So if the company has limited liability, who do you think has the other portion of that liability? You guys can come off mute. Let me know.
The
We
owner.
we do.
Thank
Yeah.
do. He said, we do. Exactly. She said, the owner. Exactly. So whoever set up the LLC, whoever is the managing member or the authorized member of the LLC, right? So with this example, if somebody decides to sue your LLC and now they're suing your LLC for $500,000, they can easily find out who the owner is. All they have to do is go to the Secretary of State's website. They can put the name of the business and boom, all of your personal information shows up. Why? Because you're a part of the public records. Why? Because an LLC is a statutory entity. You went straight to the state in order to set it up, right? And so all of your information is just there in plain sight, okay? So there's no form of privacy. So now what happens is now what happens is they are now going to proceed with the lawsuit, and now there's a judgment on your LLC for $500,000, right? And so if your LLC can cover the $500,000, great. But what if your LLC can't cover the $500,000? Then what the judge can very well do is the judge can pierce through the corporate veil. The corporate veil is that a little itty bitty piece of protection or that tiny little umbrella that you thought you had. You thought you had a little bit of protection, right? You thought you had protection, but it was a little bit of protection, right? And so the judge is now going to pierce through that umbrella and they're going to go after the authorized member, which is you. So now they're going to go after you for everything that you have, meaning that they are going to garnish your wages. They're going to garnish all of your bank accounts. They're going to seize all of your assets, like your house, your car, the paintings, the jewelry, the purses, everything that you have, everything in order to cover that $500,000 judgment. Okay. So you do not want that to happen. So a trust can actually protect you from this. The way that a trust can protect you from this is you want to set up a trust. You want that trust to own your business. So you do not want to be the owners of your LLC. You are doing things backward if you're structured this way. So the trust needs to own the LLC. And then what is going to happen is if they decide to go after the LLC, then they will go after the trust. So you're going to remove yourself from being the owner on paper and you're going to add the trust as the owner on paper. That is going to protect you and it's also going to protect the company, right? Because once again, if there's a judgment on the business, right, they're going to go after the trust. And it's very hard to sue an irrevocable trust, okay? And they're not going to go after you personally, which means that they won't be able to garnish or seize any of your assets, okay? Which is ultimately what you want. It is what you want, okay? So let me show you quickly. Hold on a second. So let me show you quickly what a testimony regarding lawsuits. One second.
Just a quick story. Just a quick story of.
Let's see here. There we go.
Why I'm here. I was sued. I lost everything. And when I say everything, I'm talking about a $700,000 house. I'm talking about 4 vehicles. I'm talking about my bank account. I'm talking about my life savings. I believed in having 6 months of expenses put up, saved up just in case anything happened, lost a career and stuff like that. All of that was gone. And there was no protection for me. Then I had my third bout with cancer. I haven't had any income since 2020, since COVID. As I told you, I think yesterday, I've been looking for a way to protect myself because I have children that are going to depend on me. So I would encourage anyone that would listen to anything that has been taught and said by you, please, 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 if you work hard to gain assets, do whatever you can do to protect your assets. Why do you think they've hid this from us for so long? Why do you think they were the only ones that were saying trust fund babies? It was because they were the only ones who were privileged to know this, who was privy to this knowledge. Now we have it through Christina. And I thank you for your level of knowledge and for not being a gatekeeper and for giving us what we need to know in order to make this happen. So please, 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 if you endeavor to get anything in this world and to keep anything in this world, please, please, please protect it. Get your trusts. And I have no reason other than my knowledge and what I've been through. But the only reason I'm here is because I've been through it. So I would encourage anyone.
All right, you guys. So with that being said, do not wait until you are getting sued in order to protect yourself, okay? Because you will be cut off guard, okay? So now let me ask you another question. You know that we all have our primary residence, right? We have a house that we live in with our children. Now, this house is in our personal name. My question to you is, if anything happens to where you don't wake up tomorrow and this house is in your personal name, how is it going to be transferred to your children? How is it going to be transferred to your son or your daughter's name? So come off mute, let me know.
Through beneficiary and of the trust.
So it's in your personal name and there is no trust involved, right? So the house is in your name and
Oh,
you did not wake up.
oh, if you didn't, like, probate or like your will, you did a will.
That is correct. Thank you so much for answering the question. You guys are correct. So basically what happens is you guys are leaving it up to a judge to be able to make the decision if your son or your daughter will receive your property. You're making it up, you're leaving it up to the judge for the judge to be able to transfer that house into your daughter's name or into your son's name, right? And you have to understand that this judge doesn't know you, this judge does not know your children, right? So you are doing them a major disservice by allowing it to happen this way, right? And so I like the fact that you mentioned a will because some people think that a will is the end all be all when it is not, right? So let me explain to you what a will is, right? So a will is a legal set of instructions, right? Which is your last will and testament. I personally call it a wish list because in the will, you're saying, I wish my daughter will get my house. I wish my son will get my car. I wish my granddaughter will get the cash money that's in my bank account, right? And so that's what you're saying on a will. And a will is designed to be carried out in the probate court system, okay? So those are the instructions that the judge is going to go by, which is your will. Now, a trust supersedes a will. Why? Because a will is only a set of instructions, it's not an entity. A will cannot own anything like a trust can, okay? So a trust can own your car, a trust can own your house, a trust can actually own things, okay? And what you want is for it to be that way to where you have an actual entity that's able to own things. Now, everything that's inside of your will, meaning all of those provisions, can be placed into the trust. That's why I'm telling you that a trust supersedes a will, okay? So now let's just say that you have a will, right? You have this will and then you have assets. So you have a house, you have a car, you have $500,000 in the bank, right? And you did not wake up tomorrow. The first thing that's going to happen is the state where you're a resident, they are going to create an estate for you. Why? Because you failed to do it yourself. So, for example, if you are a resident of Texas, Texas State is going to create an estate for you. If your name is John Doe, they're going to create the John Doe estate. They're then going to transfer all of your assets into that living estate that they have just created for a dead person. So they're going to put your house in there, they're going to put your car in there, and they're going to put the $500,000 that you have sitting inside of your savings account in there. Okay. And so now your estate needs to be, it's going to go straight into the probate court system. It needs to be represented by a probate attorney. And now the first thing that's going to happen within the probate court system is the judge is going to take care of your liabilities, meaning all of your debt, everything that you owe. So if you owe credit card debt, if you owe student loans from 30 years ago, if you owe like a mortgage or a personal loan or any type of creditors, right? And I'm telling you that the creditors, they come out of nowhere, right? Then the judge is going to fulfill all of those liabilities, right? And pay off all of your debt. Now, one thing that I want you to be aware of that a lot of people never think about is the medical bills that you're going to have at the end of life. Remember, you might have been sitting in the ICU for a week and now your ICU bill is $300,000, right? You could have been in a nursing home or a rehabilitation center or a group home, right? Assisted living facility, right? And so what happens is we rack up a lot of medical bills at the end of life. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I have insurance. Guess what? These insurance companies, they didn't expect for you to expire, and so they want to be reimbursed, okay? So for example, Medicare, Medicaid, they're coming after your estate, okay? They want to be reimbursed. The state is not going to play with you, okay? And so what's going to happen is they're going to attempt to make claims against your assets. So if you have, let's just say you have to reimburse Medicare $300,000, right? But you don't have it, right? You don't have it. So what happens is now the judge is going to decide to liquidate your assets. So let's just say that that you did have it, right? Anything that is left over is what your children get. So if you don't have enough money to fulfill all of those liabilities, the judge is going to liquidate your assets. So now the judge says, oh, we're going to sell the house. So now your son and your daughter are fighting to keep mom and dad's house, right? Unfortunately. And so they're either fighting the court system or sometimes they're fighting each other, right? And we've seen probate courts that they can go on for almost a decade, right? So usually it's about 6 months, but it can last 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years into the future, depending on the circumstances, right? So with that being said, what's going to happen is they are going to liquidate your assets. They're going to sell mom and dad's house in order to cover the $300,000 medical bill and the reimbursement from Medicare and Medicaid, okay? And whatever is left over is what your children get. So unfortunately, your children are getting the leftovers. And I will sit here and tell you that unfortunately, your children are losing their inheritance. And the reason why they're losing their inheritance is because you failed to get your affairs in order, right? So what you need to do is you need to get your affairs in order, which means that you need to create your estate now while you're living, okay? Do not wait and do not allow the state to create a living estate for you, okay? So you want to create your estate now while you're living, which means that you're going to go ahead and establish a trust. And you're going to name that trust whatever you want, right? Just do not name it after yourself. So for example, my favorite flower is a sunflower, right? So I'm going to call my estate the Sunflower Estate. The Sunflower Estate cannot be traced back to Christina Yvette. So no one knows that I'm associated with the Sunflower Estate, right? And now I'm going to place everything in there. I'm going to place the car, the house, and the cash inside of the Sunflower Estate, okay? And so that's what you need to do, because now what happens is you decided, I'm going to get my affairs in order. I'm going to set up my trust. I'm going to go ahead and transfer my assets into my trust. And now you didn't wake up tomorrow. Well, guess what? You have a successor trustee. You had a succession plan in place to where your successor is going to pick up where you left off. So they're literally going to continue to operate the trust, and those assets are going to continue to be maintained inside of the trust. And your children have been listed as the beneficiaries. So they're going to continue to benefit from the trust organization, which is extremely powerful, right? And the trust is going to continue because it's designed to outlive you, okay? And now what's going to happen is that debt that you had, that debt dies with you. Okay. So those creditors that came after you, the Medicare, the Medicaid, the student loans, the credit cards, everything, all of that debt dies with you because those creditors cannot come after your trust because you are not the trust and the trust is not you. They can only go after assets that are in your personal name and attached to your social security number. Those assets that are inside of the trust are not in your name and they're not attached to your social security number, okay? So that means that that debt, it not only does it die with you, but it has to be discharged by those companies because those claims cannot be made against your estate, okay? Which is extremely powerful, right? And so this is what you want your children to go through because at the end of the day, if your children just lost the most important person in their life, right? You want them to be able to grieve in peace. You don't want them to drag. You do not want to force them to be dragged through the probate court system, okay? Trust me, I know because I lost my mom 5 years ago. So I know exactly what this process is, and you do not want your children to go through this process. Last time I checked, you know that you want your children to receive their entire inheritance. And the way that you're structured right now, and the reason why you don't have a living estate is going to be the reason why they lose their inheritance. How many times have you seen it to where homes are being auctioned through the county, through the court system? Why? Because the court system is taking your property away. Okay, auctioning it off to pay off your debt. You don't want that. Trust me. Okay, so let's continue on with the presentation. Let me jump right back into these slides here. So let's move on to the next thing, right? So hold on, let's get back in here. Okay, so let's talk about the wealth building formula. Okay, now I have three pillars here. The first one is structure, the second one is credit, the third one is invest. So let's talk about structure, okay? Now, if you do not have a trust within your structure, you need to get restructured. Every single person should have a for-profit and a nonprofit within their structure. These are the three trusts that I recommend. I recommend a business trust, a private family trust, and a tax-exempt nonprofit trust. So let's break down all three trusts. So the first one is a business trust. This trust you can operate in two ways. The first way is by operating it as a traditional business instead of opening up an LLC or a corporation. So this trust is going to have products and services. So it's going to operate traditionally, right? Where you're doing a restaurant or e-commerce or retail, whatever kind of business that you have, right? The second way is the business trust can operate as a holding company, which means that it is non-operational, so it doesn't have any products or services or employees. And what it does is it holds your other companies. Your other companies are your LLCs and your corporations. So what happens here is this business trust is now going to be the owner of your LLC. Just like how I mentioned earlier, right? Remember, you need to take yourself off of the LLC. You do not want to be liable. You want the business trust to now be liable. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back down to the Secretary of State where you created that LLC. You're going to process an amendment to the Articles of Organization. You're going to remove yourself as an authorized member. You're then going to add the business trust now as the authorized member. Once you process that amendment, now the Secretary of State is going to update the public records to represent and show that that LLC is owned by a business trust, okay? And that means that that business trust is 100% liable for that LLC, and you are not being shown anywhere on the business paperwork, which is what you want. Please do not directly own your LLC. You need to have that first layer of protection, which is your business trust, okay? So now that your business trust owns the LLC, whatever money that the LLC generates, it can go and be K1 distributed straight into the business trust. So let's just say that your LLC created, let's just say that your LLC generated $100,000, right? So that $100,000, all of it can go straight into the business trust. And so now the business trust just received $100,000 from the LLC. Now the business trust is a for-profit entity, okay? And one of the beautiful things about the business trust is that we are going to spend the money first and then we're taxed on the leftovers, okay? So we're gonna spend the money first. 100,000 came in. Let's just say that it costs us about 30,000 in order to operate the business trust. So we're gonna write off 30,000 in a tax deduction, and now we have $70,000 left in income. So with that income, we're gonna have to file taxes, and we're gonna have to pay taxes. Now, with a business trust, you pay anywhere between 10% upwards of 39% in taxes, which is a little high. So we need to be strategic here. One of the things that only a business trust can do, right, or a trust in general can do, is it can distribute to its beneficiaries, okay? So what we're gonna do is, instead of us paying taxes on the $70,000, we are going to distribute it to the beneficiary so that the beneficiary can pay taxes on the 70,000 instead of the business trust. So what we do specifically is we make the beneficiary of the business trust the family trust, okay? Why? Because money needs to be generated from the business trust and it needs to flow straight into the family, okay? So with that being said, what's going to happen now is the 70,000 has just went into the family trust as income, okay? And remember that with the business trust, right, we had 100,000 that came in, so we wrote off 30,000, we distributed 70, which means that we have $0 left. So because we have $0 left, that means that our tax liability is 0%, so we pay $0 in taxes, okay? So we're all done paying taxes for the business trust. Now we're gonna move on to the family trust. So inside of the family trust, right, this is where all of your personal assets are gonna go, meaning your primary residence, any royalties that you might have, your life insurance policies, other things like your cars, your cash, your jewelry, purses, equipment, weapons, things of that nature, okay? So these are all assets that you're going to place inside of your family trust. You're going to have your children be the beneficiaries of your family trust, okay? So those are going to be your son, daughter, spouse, your next of kin, whoever is important and whoever you want to receive those assets, okay? So now, once again, the family trust is going to spend the money first and then be taxed on the leftovers. Remember, 70,000 came in and we're responsible to pay taxes anywhere between 10% of upwards of 37%, right? So we have to spend the money first. Now, what does operating your family look like? Well, last time I checked, you have a mortgage or you pay rent, right? You have utilities, you have gas, you have a car note, you have insurance, you have life insurance, you have school tuition, you have groceries, right? You have medical bills, you have all of these things, right? So let's just say out of the 70,000 that came in, your operating expenses was equivalent to 60,000. So you just wrote off 60,000, now you have $10,000 left. So with the $10,000 that's left, right, you can clearly pay 10% tax liability on the 10,000, which means only $1,000. Or what you can do is you can do what we call a charitable contribution. A charitable contribution is where you're going to donate that $10,000 to a charity of your choice, right? So it can be any nonprofit that you would like. So what we do is we create our own nonprofit, okay? So then we'll go on to the next one, which is your tax exempt nonprofit trust, right? You get to choose where the donation goes. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna donate it to your charity, okay? So you're gonna donate that 10,000 to your tax exempt nonprofit trust. Now on the family trust level, remember 70,000 came in. We wrote off and did a tax deduction of 60,000 for operating expenses, and then we did a charitable contribution for 10,000. So now that's the whole 70,000. So we have $0 left, which means that we have a tax liability of 0, which means we pay $0 in taxes. Okay. So now we're going to move down to the tax exempt nonprofit trust. This is a 508c1a designated trust, which is labeled as a faith-based organization. This organization is automatically exempt from federal income taxes. So you do not have to file a 1041 with this type of trust, okay? And it's automatically exempt because of the separation between church and state. Okay, so it's extremely powerful. Now, it can also qualify to be exempt from state taxes, city taxes, property taxes, sales taxes, and all other forms of taxes. Okay. So what happens is the $10,000 comes straight into the tax exempt nonprofit trust. And then from there, you can deploy it wherever you would like. Okay. So you can borrow from the trust and take it out. You can also do your philanthropic endeavors with it. You can transfer it to a charity. You can use it for tithes and offerings. You can also invest it. So you can put it into a business, stocks, life insurance policies. You can put it into anything, right? You can invest it into crypto, real estate, whatever it is that you would like, okay? So you can deploy that $10,000 any way that you would like, okay? Now, one of the beautiful things about this trust is that once again, because it is a charity, the IRS will allow you to donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to any charity. So if you're a W-2 employee, and let's just say that you make $100,000 for the year, the IRS will allow you to donate up to $60,000 of your annual gross income, and then you can then donate it to your charitable trust, and then you will only be taxed on 40% versus 100%, okay, which is extremely powerful because now you're going to be saving thousands of dollars on taxes, okay? So now let's move on to the next pillar. The next pillar is credit, okay? So when it comes to credit, this is my favorite thing, right? So remember earlier in the call how I told you you need to leverage OPM, other people's money, right? That's exactly what I did. So when I bought my first property, I leveraged someone else's money, right? And so my mentor, he is a hard money lender, and so he has a private equity firm where he lends, up to 100% for real estate, right? And so that is the position that I put myself in, to borrow OPM, other people's money. So that's what you need to do. So now with your trust, right, what I want you to know and understand is that the trust can build credit. So you want to put yourself in a position to where you are able to build credit for the trust so that you can have a second credit profile so that you can leverage that business credit. So the trust is going to get an EIN and it's going to build credit off of the EIN. And then it can get loans from the banks like credit cards and lines of credit, right? And so when it comes to business credit, you can get higher lines of credit. Like instead of you getting like $20,000, you'll get like $100,000, right? 200,000, 300,000. So that is the position that we need to put ourselves in, okay? In order for us to be able to acquire assets, we need the funding. And so you need to be able to leverage OPM, other people's money, okay? So let's move on to the next one, which is invest. Now, these are my two favorite assets of all times. So the first one is the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, and the second one is real estate. So with the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, right, it's short for IUL. And with this policy, what I want you to know is that life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living, not when you're dead. If it was supposed to be used when you're dead, it would be called death insurance. But it's called life insurance for a reason because there's so many living benefits and you need to be able to use it while you're alive, okay? So for example, with the life insurance policy, right? There's nothing but liquidity in your life insurance policy, right? It is protected, which means that if somebody tries to sue you, they cannot take the money that you have inside of your life insurance policy, okay? So another thing is that it's seen as an asset. And another thing is that it has a death benefit associated. So your life is insured. If anything happens to you, there's a death benefit. That death benefit goes straight to your beneficiaries. So let's just say it's $1 million. That $1 million goes straight to your beneficiaries, okay? And then there is, for this specific type of policy, there is another an account, and it's called cash value. And so every single time that you make your premium payments, right, you are going to be building up cash value or accumulating cash value. So for example, let's just say that you set up your policy, right? And you structure it a kind of way to where it is like an 80-20 split, right? And so if you pay $100 a month, let's just say $20 is going to the life insurance company, and it is for the cost of insurance, and then 80% is going to your cash value, right? So that $80 is going to your cash value. So every single time that you make that $100 payment, right? $80 is being deposited into your cash value, and it's starting to accumulate. So you're getting $80, $80, $80, $80, right? And now one of the most beautiful things about this type of policy is the index, right? And so the word index is referring to the indice, and we're referring to the indice in the stock market. So what happens in the index is that you're going to start to earn compound interest, okay? So the index, there are several different types of indexes. You have the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500. And this is referring to the top 500 companies in the country, okay? And so typically the S&P 500 will give you anywhere between 8 to 10%. So let's just say that we're getting 10%, right? And so now remember that you had $80, $80, $80, $80. Whatever is inside of your cash value is going to earn compound interest, and it's going to mirror the market. So your money is not directly invested inside of the market. It's just going to be mirroring the market, okay? So that means that this is risk-free, because if the market crashes, your money is not going to go down with the market. It's going to stay the same and not earn any interest, okay? So the accumulation of your cash value, the $80, $80, $80 plus the compound interest of 10% is where you're going to grow your wealth, okay? So it is extremely powerful. Now, the way that you tie this in with the trust is that the trust is going to own the life insurance policy. You are going to be the insured. The trust is going to pay the premiums every single month, and the trust is going to be the beneficiary of that policy, okay? So it's extremely powerful, and I'll touch on it in just a moment. So let's talk about real estate, because that is absolutely my favorite thing to talk about. I absolutely love real estate. I have been a real estate investor for 11 years, okay? And I have a portfolio of over 7 figures in property. So with this being said, right, what I need you to know is that a trust can own real estate, a trust can get a mortgage, a trust can get a home equity line of credit, okay? It's super powerful. So what you're gonna do is you wanna put the trust in a position to where it can sustain itself. You do not want to pour in your W-2 money into the trust, right? That is not what you wanna do. That is not why you're setting up a trust. You want the trust to acquire its own assets so that it's put in a position to where it can sustain itself, and eventually you can give up your 9-to-5 job and just depend on the trust, okay? So with that being said, what happens is, let's just say that the trust is going to acquire real estate. Let's just say that the trust just bought a triplex, right? So with this triplex, what's going to happen is you have 1 roof, 3 doors, right? And the first thing that's going to happen is the trust is going to qualify for a mortgage, okay? The type of mortgage is a DSCR loan, which stands for debt service coverage ratio. So this is a loan that's given to entities specifically for income producing properties, and they will lend you up to 80% of the purchase price. So let's just say that we get 80% of whatever the purchase price is for this real estate, okay? So now what's going to happen next is we need to be able to come up with the other 20%, okay? So what we're going to do is, remember, let's go back, let's rewind just a little bit. Remember, we talked about OPM, other people's money, specifically the bank's money, okay? Now, one thing that I want you to know about the bank is that their #1 asset is life insurance. So I need you to look this up, okay? So It's called BOLI, BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. Okay, so if the bank's number one asset is life insurance, what do you think your number one asset should be? I need to hear somebody say it. What do you think your number one asset should be?
Life insurance.
Thank you so much. So, the bank's number one asset is life insurance policies, okay? Like if you have a life insurance policy, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase, they will buy it from you. Why? Because one thing is for sure. What do you think that one thing is? What do you think that one thing is?
They're going to be able to collect on it.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I got nothing but smart people on the call. I love it. Yes, that is the one thing that is for sure. They're going to be able to collect that death benefit. Why do you think they collect life insurance policies? It's powerful. So a lot of people, they think that the banks are just getting rich off of, lending you for, credit cards and mortgages, but they really getting rich off the life insurance policies. So you need to do what the bank is doing, and you need to get rich off of your life insurance policy. That's number one. Number two is the second way the bank is getting rich is off of OPM, other people's money, right? So whose money do you think that the banks is using? Let me hear it.
Money.
Thank you. Okay, so when your money, I have a question. When your money is directly deposited into the bank, what happens to it?
They loan it out.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. So we live in a fractional reserve system where only a fraction, which I think is probably like 10% of whatever is supposed to be in that account is really in that account. So you log it in and you see $1,000, but there's only $100 in there, right? There's really only $100 in your account, right? Because they've lent out the rest for mortgage, credit cards, loans, student loans, everything, right? So that's the fractional reserve system that we live in, okay? So now you understand the second way that they're getting that they are building wealth is by leveraging your money, your direct deposit, your paycheck, right? So they are also leveraging OPM, other people's money, okay, which is extremely powerful. And so, because when you put your money direct deposit into the bank, you're actually lending them, right? That's a loan, right? That you're giving them. So it's extremely powerful. So now what you want to do is you want to go back, like I said, and get those credit cards and those lines of credit for your trust so that your trust can leverage the OPM, which is the bank's money, okay? So now let's just say that your trust got a line of credit for $50,000, right? And so that's the 20% that they need for real estate, right? So what we're gonna do is where we got this line of credit for $50,000. And so we are going to strip that credit card, okay? So now we've stripped the credit card, that money went direct deposit into our bank account, okay? And so now before we go to deposit it into the real estate transaction as a down payment, where do you think that money should go?
In your IUL.
Thank you, my goodness. I'm just so excited. I'm telling you, you guys are doing a home run here. So the answer is yes. It's going to go straight into your IUL. So that $50,000 that you just liquidated from your credit card, right? So there's ways that we can do this. Okay, we liquidate our credit card. That $50,000 goes into our bank account. We're then going to deploy we're going to first deploy that $50,000 into the first place where we're going to park it, okay? So we're going to park it straight into our index universal life insurance policy. So we're going to funnel that money right inside there, and it's going to go straight into our cash value. Our cash value is going to go up by 50,000, right? And remember, we are going to be earning compound interest, which means that 50,000 is now going to make 10%, right? Because the S&P 500 is yielding us 10% returns, right? So now that 50,000, you just parked it in a place where it's going to work for you. So that's what you need to do. You need to invest and put your money in places where it's going to work for you. You do not have to work for money. Your money works for you. You need to put it in the right place to where it's going to multiply. You need to put it in the right place to where it's going to bring back friends. You need to put it in the right place to where every single dollar is going to bring back 10 cents. So that's what's happening. All 50,000 of those dollars is bringing back 10 cents, right? So that is extremely powerful because now your money is growing, which is what you want, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to request a loan from the life insurance company. Why? Because we need that money for real estate, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to ask them for a loan. And what they're going to do is they are going to use our cash value as collateral. They are not going to take the $50,000 out of our cash value. They are going to lend us $50,000 from their personal bank account. They're going to direct deposit the $50,000 into our bank account. And our $50,000 is going to stay inside of the cash value earning compound interest as if we never touched it, which is extremely powerful, right? So now at this point, the 50,000 is back in our bank account and now we can deploy it to the second place. So where's the second place where we're going to put the 50,000? Real estate, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use it as a down payment for the real estate. So now we are acquiring this triplex, okay? So we have the DSCR loan that put up 80%. We have the credit card where we were able to liquidate the 50% of 50,000. And now at this point, we just acquired a triplex for 100% of the money, right? 100% financing, which is 0% down. So we just bought a real estate investment property for 0% down, okay? So I personally do this strategy all the time. There are so many properties. I have bought dozens and dozens and dozens of property with $0 out of my own money, okay? And I love the DSCR loan, okay? So now when it comes to this property, right? We just closed on it. And now it's the first of the month, right? Today's April 1st. So we closed on it a couple days ago. Today's April 1st. We're gonna go ahead and collect rent. So we're gonna get $2,000 per door is 3 doors. That's $6,000 in rent. So now we just collected rent today, $6,000, right? Now, where is the $6,000 gonna go? I need to hear it. Come off mute. I need to hear it.
IUL.
Thank you so much. We have a genius in the building and I'm not playing. Like, I love it. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So that $6,000, before that money is deployed anywhere, you are going to decide to pay yourself first. And that $6,000 is going to go straight into your IUL policy. Your cash value is going to go up by $6,000, okay? Then you're going to request a loan through the life insurance company carrier, and they are going to lend you back the $6,000. It could be a little bit less, it could be $5,500, okay? Just depending on what cushion that they want to set for your cash value, okay? So let's just say that they lend you $5,500, right? So the $5,500 goes back into your bank account. Now you're able to pay your mortgage, you're able to pay the credit card, and then whatever is left over is going to sit inside of your bank account, right? For you to then be able to accumulate it for the next property. So with this strategy, what you need to do is you need to rinse and repeat, okay? So you need to be able to do it all over again, right? So that you're able to accumulate many properties and you can actually retire off of this, right? Because a lot of us, we have bought into the system, right? And the lie that the system has told us is that we need to work for 40 years, right? We need to work for 40 hours a week for 40 years, and we need to retire when we're 65 years old, right? And I will tell you that that is definitely not the way, right? That is not the way that you want to retire, you can retire young. I was able to retire myself from my nursing career at 31 years old. And the way that I did that is through the wealth building formula that I have just taught you in the last 10 minutes, okay? So I need you to know that you can retire young, you can retire rich. It is totally possible, right? And we just need to stop buying into the lies that society has told us. Because I will tell you, the day that I decided to retire at a young age, right? One day I was at work and I had a coworker and her name is Miss Audrey, right? And so Miss Audrey, she's 65 years old. And she's absolutely tired, right? She's exhausted at work. And I'm young, I'm 25, I'm just doing donuts around the whole entire unit, right? And so I end up taking care of my patients and her patients. So I look at her and I'm like, Miss Audrey, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, you're 65 years old and you have been working as a nurse for 40 years. And that is the truth. She had, at that time, she had been working as a nurse for 40 years. So I said, when are you going to retire? So she tells me, Christina, I'm not ready to retire. And I'm like, why not? She's like, I'm going to wait until I'm 67 and a half. And I said, why? I didn't understand. She said, Social Security will give me an extra $300 if I retire at 67 and a half. And I looked at her and I'm like, Miss Audrey, so you mean to tell me that you're going to work another 2.5 years for an extra $300? And she's like, yes. And I said, okay. And at that moment in time, in that space right there, I decided that I was not going to be Miss Audrey, that I was not going to work 40 hours a week for 40 years and retire when I was 65, or in her case, 67 and a half, right? And so I told myself right then and there that I was only going to give myself 10 years in this career. And I was able to retire myself at 31 years old. And I only worked in my nursing career for 8 years, okay? So, I don't want you to be like Miss Audrey because unfortunately, that day after work, she got into her car and when she was exiting out of the parking lot, she hit the tree right in front of the emergency room and she died on impact. She never made it to 67 and a half. She never made it home that day. So I don't want you to believe the lies and the programming that society has made us believe, right? Because we have been institutionalized since kindergarten, right? So from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, right? In our education system, we have learned that we need to go to a concrete box and we need to sit there for 7 to 8 hours and we need to have lunch and we need to do everything in solitude and in a uniform way. And then we go home, we relax for 2 to 3 hours, we go to sleep and we do it all over again Monday through Friday. Okay. So it has been programming since almost birth. Okay. And we need to unlearn the things that we've learned and we need to undo the programming. Okay, so if you want to live a life that is worth living, meaning that you want location freedom, time freedom, and financial freedom, you need to undo what has been done. You need to go a different way. You need to have a different set of mindset, right? Your mindset needs to be different. So that's going to require you to set up a trust. That's going to require you to get a life insurance policy. That's going to require you to pay yourself first. That's going to require you to invest in real estate, right? So those are the things that are required in order for you to be able to retire, right? For you to be able to leave a legacy, for you to be able to create generational wealth. That is what's required of you, right? Because a lot of us, we never even think to ourselves, how am I going to transfer my wealth? You never ask yourself that question, right? And then a lot of us were lying. We're walking around here lying, saying we're building generational wealth, but we're not because we don't have the tools to build generational wealth, right? So what you need to do is you need to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. Owning nothing but controlling everything is stewardship, right? And stewardship is extremely powerful because that means that you're being a good steward of the wealth. You're being a good steward of the assets. You're being a good steward of the money. You're being a good steward of everything that has been given to you, right? Versus ownership. So remember, our programming, they have programmed us to get the house with the white picket fence. They have programmed us to have the nuclear family, right? And so because of our programming, we are so obsessed with ownership. Right? And so they want you to own your house. They want you to own your car. They want you to own your bank account, right? Why? Because all of those things that you acquire, you use your name and your social. That is a tracking system in society. Do you know that everywhere that you put your name and your social, they can see it? Every employer, every asset, everything, right? Everything, your name and you use your name and your social for everything. So they're able to monitor and track, right? So you want to be able to pull yourself out of that system, and you want to now be able to use the trust. And the trust also has, something similar to a social, which is the EIN, right? Because you have to understand, right, when we're brainwashed into ownership, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there. So a lot of us, we think, oh, I have to own my house. I have to own my house. No, you don't, right? The trust can own your house and you can control your house. Because at the end of the day, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, that house is still going to be there. So what you truly wanted was control. You didn't want ownership. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing to you is control while you're alive. And so the trust is going to give you that. The trust is going to give you control while you're alive, okay? So how do you actually transfer your wealth? You're going to do it through trust certificate units. Trust certificate units are just like stock certificates, okay? So you know how stock certificates represent ownership in a corporation? Well, trust certificates represents beneficial interest in a trust, okay? So that's extremely powerful. And that is exactly what you want to do. So your trust is going to establish 100 trust certificate units. You're going to then distribute those to your beneficiaries. Let's just say you have 4 beneficiaries, you give them 25 each, right? I'm one of your beneficiaries. I just received 25%, right? I just received 25 TCUs, which represents 25% of beneficial interest. Let's just say that your trust is worth $1 million. That means that my TCUs are worth $250,000, which is a lot of money, right? So that is how you're going to be able to pass down your wealth from generation to generation, because the trust certificate units are going to be passed down from generation to generation. So for example, if something happens to me, then my 25 units are going to go to my 3 children. And then my 3 children are going to disperse it to their 5 children. Then my 5 grandchildren are going to disperse it to their 10 grandchildren. And that's how it works. Okay, so that's what generational wealth looks like. Now, what you need to do is you need to put yourself in a position to where you're preserving the wealth. Because a lot of us, we see athletes, celebrities, and famous families, they're actually losing their wealth, right? And they lose it in their lifetime, or the next generation loses it, right? So for example, within wealthy families, about 90% of the wealth is lost by the 2nd or 3rd generation, which is highly unfortunate. And the reason why is because they didn't have the tools for preservation, right? And so what are the tools for preservation? Well, the tools are, one, you need a trust, and the second thing you need is life insurance, right? So you have to understand that the trust insures everything, right? So the trust has a lot of assets. The trust has a house, it has homeowners insurance. The trust has a car, it has automobile insurance. The trust has a bank account, it has FDIC. So the trust also has what we call human assets. These human assets are you and your beneficiaries, okay? So if anything happens to you, right, the trust has you insured. So you are the human assets. The trust has you insured with the life insurance, right? And if anything happens to you, the trust is the beneficiary. So that death benefit is going to go to the trust. So for example, with my personal policy, my death benefit is $2.8 million. So that means that $2.8 million is going to go straight into the trust, right? If anything were to happen to me, okay? So now what the trust does is it ensures that the trustee, the co-trustees, the beneficiaries, and the future beneficiaries, those future beneficiaries are called trust fund babies. So that is when a baby is born into the trust organization, okay? So that is super important because now the first thing that happens is that trustee is going to take out a policy on that baby. So once that baby hits 30 days old, they're going to have a life insurance policy, specifically an index universal life insurance policy, okay? And we're going to be paying in $100 a month, okay? Now, the beautiful thing is that because that baby is only 30 days old, there's going to be a lot of compounding, right? Just imagine how much compound interest that you're going to be accumulating throughout the years, right? Right? So let's just fast forward into the future and say that this trust fund baby has now turned 18 years old and they have to go to college. But before they go to college, they want to set a new Hot Wheels, right? And so what's going to happen is they need a car so they can go down to the dealership, they can pull their credit, and they can go ahead and get a new vehicle, right? And get into $1,000 payment, and this $1,000 payment is going to be for a $30,000 car. They can clearly do that. Or because they are a trust fund baby, what they can do is they can go straight to the trust. They can ask for a loan for $30,000. And what's going to happen is that trustee is going to then cut them a check and give them a check for the $30,000 so they can go buy their car cash. So now let's just say that they went and bought their car cash, right? In order for them to show some financial responsibility, we're going to require them to pay the trust $300 a month. Okay, so now this trust fund baby is paying the trust $300 a month, right? Which means that they're responsible. Okay, but let's just say a year into the future they decide to default. Well, that's not good, right? But at the end of the day, it was a risk-free loan. So it's okay that the trust fund baby defaulted because the money did not originate from the trust. The money actually originated from the trust fund baby's life insurance policy. So the minute that trust fund baby came to the trust organization and asked for $30,000, what occurred was the trustee went and contacted the carrier and requested a loan for $30,000. Now that $30,000 was direct deposited into the trust fund account. The trustee then wrote a check for the $30,000 and issued it to the beneficiary. That $30,000 does not need to be paid back. It is automatically going to be deducted from the death benefit. So any loan that you take against your cash value never has to be paid back, okay? So let's just say that their death benefit is $3 million. It's going to be $3 million minus $30,000. All right, so now fast forward into the future when that trust fund baby expires, that $3 million minus 30 is going to go straight into the trust, and the trust is now replenished with $3 million, right? And so that's what preservation of wealth looks like, because you're going to ensure that everyone a part of the trust organization is insured. And we're going to do this from generation to generation to generation, okay? So that's what preservation of wealth looks like. So now these are the books that I recommend. I recommend What Would the Rockefellers Do? That's a really good book that teaches you about the marriage between trust and life insurance. The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2 teaches you about trusteeship. Family Wealth teaches you how to run your family like a business. Each of us should be running our family like a business, right? So I'm the CEO of my family. My spouse is the CFO of our family, right? My children are secretaries of the family, right? So everyone needs to be running their family like a business. And then the last one is the Complete Book of Trust, which teaches you about the different types of trust. So now I want to show you a quick video testimonial of an individual that took action on the information that we shared tonight.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while, and there are a number of people offering trust these days, and I guess that's the big thing. don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you. And thank you, Mondo. That was a great explanation of infinite banking. I know a number of people are talking about that, but they make it so complex. And his presentation was nice and succinct and very informative. So this has been an overall great experience. I definitely will recommend you to others.
So you guys need to just take action on the information that I shared with you guys tonight, because it could be your new form of doing business, saving taxes, and protecting your assets. So you want to treat this like a big business. You don't want to treat this like a small mom and pop shop, okay? That's not what this is. A trust is the most powerful entity in the world. So what I'm going to tell you is for us to work together. So I do have a program that teaches you guys about how to set up all three of the trusts that I mentioned in this webinar. So we have three different tiers here. So the first one is do it yourself. So in the do it yourself program, it is our online course. So you can learn how to do everything independently. So we give you the templates for all three trusts, and I will show you what a template looks like in just a couple of minutes, okay? So you get the templates for all three trusts: the business trust, the private family trust, and the tax exempt nonprofit charitable trust. And then you will have access to the 43 video modules where you're going to learn step by step what's inside of the trust and how to set it up step by step so you can get it notarized and you can start using it to protect your house, your car, and your money. So you do get lifetime access to the course, which is extremely powerful, because if you want to do this whole process all over again 5 years into the future, you can. And you get access to resources and ebooks. So for example, some of the ebooks that I just mentioned in the previous slide, if you try to buy them, they're going to give you a ticket price of $800. So inside of the program, you get electronic copies. And then as far as the resources, what we do is we provide you with all of the resources that you need in order to operate the trust. So for example, if you need to transfer your house, we give you the quit claim deed. If you need to open up a bank account, we give you the steps to get your EIN. If you need to transfer your business, we give you the business purchase agreement. So there's so many things that we give you in order for you to operate the trust the right way, because efficiency is everything. And then lastly is that we have a community. So our community is over 2,200 trustees that you have access to, okay? So we have a private Facebook community where you can post and get to know each other. And then we have a Telegram chat where you're able to chat back and forth with the community members. These are individuals that are in your city, they're in your state, and they have been operating their trust for years, okay? They already have their house there, their car there, their bank accounts, and you have full access to be able to chat back and forth with your fellow trustees, okay? So the course is only $997, and you can get it on demand today and get started right away. The next thing is the Done With You. So our Done With You program, you still get the course material, but now you get to show up live on Zoom. So it is 5 Zoom calls, and it's 1 week long, and it's Monday through Friday from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So our next workshop is going to be next week, April 6th to the 10th. On Monday, we're going to focus on the business trust. So I'm going to break down every single paragraph of the trust. I'm going to teach you how to set up the trust, and then I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A so I can answer all of your questions. And it's super powerful, right? Because for example, that trust template is over 50 pages. So I'm going to break down all 50 pages live with you on Zoom in a group setting, okay? It's super powerful. So Tuesday, we're going to focus on the family trust. Once again, I'm going to break down every single paragraph so that I can teach you what's inside of the trust. Because it's very hard for you to be able to operate a trust if you don't know what's inside of the trust and if you don't understand what's inside of the trust. You're not going to be able to operate the trust efficiently or effectively. Trust me, I've been doing this for over a decade, okay? So after after we break down the paragraphs, then I show you how to set up the trust, and then I answer your questions on the spot. You don't have to wait. You don't have to call in. You don't have to, just get, you don't, you get clarity right away, which is what you want, right? So now being in that group setting is different, right? Because you're in an environment where it's like-minded individuals that are asking really good questions that you didn't know you wanted to know. So you end up learning more just by being in the workshop, okay? Now, day 3 is setting up the tax exempt EIN, the tax exempt charitable trust. And then I teach you how to become ordained if you want to become an ordained minister. And then we open up the floor for Q&A. Thursday, we're going to focus on OPM, other people's money. So one, I'm going to give you a list of banks. We're going to apply for our EINs with the IRS. Then I'm going to show you how to have board meetings. We're going through banking procedures and operations. And then our funding manager is going to come in and teach you about business credit, business funding. You need to learn how to get the funding that you need to acquire the assets, okay? When I tell you, you do not have to use any of your own money, I am being 1000% honest with you, okay? So let us teach you how to get the money from the bank so that you can buy the real estate if the real estate is what you want to buy, okay? But that's what we buy. So now that's extremely powerful, and that is on Thursdays. And then the last day is Friday. So on Friday, we focus on assets. So I'm going to teach you how to take an inventory of your assets, how to transfer your house into the trust by way of a quitclaim deed, how to transfer your car into the trust by way of a bill of sale, how to transfer your LLCs and corporations into the trust by way of a business purchase agreement and amendments through the Secretary of State. And then the last thing is that our CPA comes in and teaches you about trust taxes. So he answers all of your tax questions, and he shows you how to file taxes for the trust, okay? So that is extremely powerful when you are doing the workshop, and you have lifetime access to the workshop. So all of the workshop sessions are recorded, plus you have lifetime access, which means that you can attend every single live workshop that we have. So you can attend now in April, you can attend in May, June, July, 2027, 2028, 2029, whenever you would like, okay? So the workshop is only $2,500. Lastly is the done for you. So the done for you is where it's where we set up everything for you. Everything is completely hands off. So that means that my team and I will set up all 3 trusts for you. We'll apply for all of your EINs. We'll transfer all of your assets. So you get individualized support. You get private sessions with me where we go through structure and finalize your trust, and everything gets customized, right? And so the done for you service is only $7,500. So if you are interested in any of the tiers, then what you would do is you would go to our website. So our website is wealthytrustee.com. You can email us, you can visit us on social media, and you can give us a call or a text at 305-749-9215. Now, what I want to do is, for those of you guys that are on the call, since we have our workshop coming up, so I would love to give you 20% off. So all you have to do is, when you go to wealthytrustee.com, put in the discount code TRUST20, and then you can get 20% off of the price that you just saw. So quickly, let me show you what a trust looks like, and then I'll show you the actual program. 1 second. So this is what one of our trusts looks like, okay? So everything that you see in red is what you are going to be filling out. And remember, when I tell you, I go through every paragraph. So every single thing that you see here, these are all of the, so this is the trust constitution. These are all of the bylaws and provisions. I break down every single paragraph for you so that you can understand, so that you can understand, so you're able to operate the trust efficiently and effectively as a trustee. So I'm here to empower you so that you know, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can operate the trust correctly. Yes, I can be a trustee. So this is the actual program. This is what you get access to with any of our tiers. And after your induction, what happens is you're going to go through trust entity. So we teach you what is a trust. We teach you about the different parties like the grantor, trustee, beneficiaries, successors, and protectors. And then we teach you about the benefits and types. And then we teach you how to set up the tax-exempt nonprofit trust, how to set up the private family trust, how to set up the unincorporated business trust. And then we teach you about tax strategies so that you can operate tax exempt, so that you can know the difference between for-profit and nonprofit, and you can understand what distributable net income is and how to avoid tax evasion. And then we go through asset protection, where you first take an inventory of your assets so you know which assets you can place into the trust and which assets don't qualify. And then you're going to learn how to open up your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, how to transfer your house, your car, your insurance policies, your businesses, as well as how to have board meetings, right? Your board meetings are super important, and then that is the actual, that's the lifeline of your trust. Then you have wealth creation, where we teach you how to establish the business credit, how to invest in the stock market, and how to do the infinite banking or private money banking model for the life insurance policies. You go through the legacy crest, and then we have your resources and your ebooks. So that is the program that you guys get access to. It is called the Wealthy Trustee Program. It is robust, okay? So it is very thorough. We take you from A to Z. So if you thought that this webinar was thorough, you just can't even imagine what's inside of the program, okay? So with that being said, I want to open up the floor for Q&A, and I want to answer any questions that you might have. So does anybody have any questions based off of the short presentation that I went over in the last 100 minutes?
I do. I'm
All right.
Um, I have a question. For the 508 trust, can the trust successor trustee be my spouse's LLC or just his name?
So it can be an entity or a person.
Okay. And for the beneficiary for my 508, can I use my own revocable living trust?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'm gonna look inside of the chat. So let me see here.
Hi, Christine.
Hi. Hi, Yusuf.
Yeah, question I want to ask you. Is there, can, why is it necessary to really use your personal name? Is it necessary to use your personal name or not?
When you say your personal name, where?
For instance, your name on the trust.
No, it could be a person or an entity.
So it can be anyone's. You can use your name on the trust, your birth name.
Are you talking about to name the trust, or are you talking
Yes.
about as a trustee?
To name the trust.
So you don't want to use your personal name unless you are trying to replace your name and social. So the reason being is because you want a sense of obscurity, meaning that you don't want your trust to be associated with you. You want your trust to be separate. So that's why you wouldn't name the trust after yourself.
Okay. But why is it necessary for you to do that?
What if somebody's trying to sue you? Do you want them to take everything that's inside of your trust?
No, but isn't the trust a separate entity?
It is a separate entity, but you are now letting them know that you're associated with it so that they can make claims against it. You're not going to prevent them from making claims against it. They're only going to be able to make claims against it because you named it after yourself.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. My question is like the insurances. Any insurance that you put into the trust, converts to the IUL?
Um, so the IUL is the type of policy,
So you would have to get an IUL,
correct?
and then anything else would go into it.
When you say anything else, what do you mean? So what goes into the IUL is money.
What types of, suppose you have other insurances, what do you do with that?
You put it into the trust, not into the IUL. And IUL is a type of insurance. So if you have term life or whole life, you will put that into the trust as an asset.
Okay, okay. See, that's where I was confused at. As an
Yeah.
asset.
Yeah, it's
All
an
right.
asset. Yeah, so your life insurance policy is an asset. So if you have a term life or a whole life, you will put it into the trust. So what you want to do is you want to contact your carrier, let them know that you set up a trust and that you want to change the ownership information, the payer information, and the beneficiary. So the trust is going to be the owner, the payer, and the beneficiary of your life insurance, and you are the insured of your life insurance.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I still got some more questions, but I'm going to wait until I book my call.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Carroll.
Okay.
All right, fantastic. All right, any other final questions or comments?
Sure, I have a question.
All right, go for it, Joseph.
Can you put intellectual properties under your trust?
Yes, and royalties.
Okay. And in terms of the do it with you workshop, you have a payment plan if you can't pay all that up front?
Yes, absolutely. So if you would like to secure the 20% deposit, then you get, excuse me, if you want to secure the 20% discount, then you can put a deposit down. So the deposit is $200, and then we can roll you into a custom payment plan. We also have our traditional payment plans. So for example, with the workshop, our traditional payment plan is 5 payments of $549. So you can either go with our traditional or you can create a custom.
Right, but that all that has to be paid before you actually join the workshop.
That is correct. So you will not have
Okay.
access. Yeah, you won't have access.
Until you pay up in full. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Joseph. All right. Anybody else?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question about the UIL.
Yes, sir.
The UIL, is that the term or the whole life?
So it's its own type. So it's not whole life and it's not term. So it's called Index Universal Life. It is what we call permanent life insurance. So it's similar to whole life. Whole life is also permanent life insurance. Term is not permanent, so it's temporary. So with the IUL, the difference between the IUL and the whole life is that the whole life you receive dividends. The IUL, you receive compound interest. The whole life is not, it's not mirroring the market like IUL. So ultimately, you're going to make more money with inside of your cash value with the IUL over time because you have the potential to make 10%, 15%, 12% versus a whole life. You're going to be set at you're going to be set at one rate, and usually it's about 4%.
Okay, so the UIL comes with cash values, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot for explaining that.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next, do we have anybody else that has a question?
This is Amy.
Hey, Amy.
Hey, thank you so much for this information.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Yes, I appreciate it. If the house has a loan on it, can the deed be changed and transferred to the trust?
Yes, absolutely. You're still able to deed it over even if it has a loan or a mortgage. The mortgage is going to remain intact. It's going to remain in the person's personal name or personal credit. So they're still going to be like liable for that loan and because they signed as a personal guarantor. but you can still deed the property over into the trust, and the mortgage or loan is going to remain intact.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that question. Any other questions? I see a question in the chat. It says, if I'm using a grantor for an irrevocable trust, how would I fund it with assets that are all in my name or my husband's name without creating an issue? That's a wonderful question. So with an irrevocable trust, anyone can add assets into a trust. So the trustee, so if you are the trustee or if your spouse is the trustee, you guys are able to legitimately add assets into the trust. So one of the misconceptions is that only the grantor can add assets, but that's not true. So you plus anyone else. So it could be your grandparents, your parents, your siblings, your neighbor, anyone can add assets. Okay. So it's inside of the trust contract. So when we go through the trust, I will show you step by step that anyone can add property into the trust and how to do so.
To add to that, I'm sorry. Can you also, what if you have to, like, what if you just want to sell the house or, you know, buy a new house, and they're saying that you can't really do anything with the irrevocable, but you can still remove and update the irrevocable trust?
So that's a wonderful question. The only person who cannot remove anything or change anything is the grantor. As long as you are not the grantor, then you're fine. The trustee can change, can make any change at any time. It's called an amendment. And the trustee can add assets at any point in time and liquidate or remove assets at any point in time. So it depends on your position inside of the trust if what you're saying is applicable or not. So if you want the power to be able to change and remove, do not be the grantor.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
What's the purpose of it being a irrevocable trust rather than a revocable one?
So your assets are not protected with revocable. So a revocable trust can be pierced in court and it could be dismantled, and all creditors can go after a revocable trust because the revocable trust is not seen as a separate entity. It's seen as an extension of you because the revocable trust is going to operate under your social security number.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you one more question, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Why don't you recommend the guarantor to become the trustee?
It's just what I mentioned, right? So if you are operating a irrevocable trust, the grantor and the trustee cannot be the same person because of the nature of the contract. And I only recommend irrevocable because your assets are fully protected 100% versus a revocable where they're not protected at all. So why would you set up a trust if your assets are not protected? So if you're going to set up a trust, you might as well go all the way and set up the best type of trust, which is the irrevocable trust. With an irrevocable trust, one person cannot serve as both parties. All right. Any other? Say that
Yes.
again. Yes, go for it, Joseph.
I'm interested in a foreign EIN number as opposed to one based on the estate. Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah. So we have those resources available for you inside of the program. So you can get a foreign EIN number. It's called a 98 number. But you do have to have an address outside of the United States in order to qualify. So as long as you meet the qualifications, then you're perfectly fine and you're able to get issued a 98. So we do have the instructions for you, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. The next question I see is, are there any updates to any trust? If so, do we need to make any change for any verbiage for any established trust? No, there's no updates. So everything that's inside of the program is up to date. So, any other last questions before we adjourn tonight's webinar?
Yes, ma'am. I got one last question.
Yes, sir.
On the irrevocable trust, you well only one person can go in and make changes, right?
Yep, it's the trustee.
The trustee. Okay. And that can be myself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, you guys, so just take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight, because as I mentioned, it can actually change the trajectory of your life, and not only your life, but your kids' life too, right? Because you have to understand that you are leaving a legacy, and that means that you have to create this legacy now while you're living. And the foundation of your legacy is this trust, okay? So you want to be able to not only change your life, but the trajectory of your kids' lives, because now you're going to be training them as initially as beneficiaries, and then they're going to take over as trustees of the trust organization. So that is how you want your that's how you want to train your lineage, okay? So leaving a legacy, a lot of people think that it's important to leave all these material things, right? But it's not the material things that you leave behind that's important. It's the legacy that you leave behind, right? And so the legacy is the trust, okay? So just take heed to the information that I provided you guys with tonight, because knowledge is everything, but applied knowledge is where you get the keys to success. So you have to apply what I've told you guys today in order for you to be able to build that generational wealth that's going to last many generations. You want your wealth, because a lot of us were focused on making the $1 million, but we don't protect the $1 million. We don't preserve the $1 million. We don't conserve the $1 million. And so what you need to do is you need to be able to put yourself in that position as well as your family, okay? So I look forward to seeing all of you guys in our workshop next week. As I mentioned, it is next week, Monday through Friday, from 11 in the morning Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. It's going to be super thorough. It's me and two other educators, our funding manager and our CPA. And we're going to be teaching you all things about setting up the trust. Okay, so I hope to see you guys in the workshop. So you guys have a blessed rest of your Wednesday and a highly favored week. And we will see you again, okay? Next time.
I got
Yes,
one
sir.
question for you. It's
Go
just
for it.
pertaining.
Go for it.
It's just pertaining to if I get in the workshop.
Yes,
See,
sir.
I work 5 days a week during those hours.
Yes.
So how would I probably would have to go with a different program then, right? Because the workshop probably wouldn't suit me because
Yeah. So you can either go with the do it yourself, or you can go with the done for you if you want us to do it. With the workshop, we do record all of the sessions. So if you miss anything, a lot of people, they do work and they do still attend the workshop. They have an earpiece in, they have their Zoom playing, and they can go ahead and communicate their questions in the chat. But if you feel like you're unable to do that, you can watch.
Yeah, I'm a contractor. There's no way I could do that. I'll probably put a nail in my hand or something. There's no way I'll be able to do that.
Okay, yeah. So then the other two programs are also going to work for you as well.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take
God
care.
bless. All
God
right.
bless.